And a warm welcome back to Northampton College. I'm James. This is our Scania 113 to 143 V8 conversion and the first of our electrical challenges. So what we're going to look at today, tachometer, our rev counter, wasn't correlated to the actual engine speed. There was a slight discrepancy. We're going to look at how we diagnosed it. We're going to look at the workings of an alternator and then the solution to get it right. So sit back and enjoy. So we've added one of our training engines at the college just for a point of reference. We all know we're talking about the Scania alternator, but this is so handy to talk about. It's right in front. Our alternator, this is a device that's providing charge to the battery, but it's built up of many components. Right at the back here, you see lots of connections. This one here goes to the batteries. So your big wire coming off the back is sending electrical charge to the batteries to charge them up. But before this can generate electricity, we've got to turn the insides into one big electromagnet. So coming through the insides, you have two carbon brushes that press on the back of this shaft that rotates internally. This is called the rotor. This is connected at the front pulley. The rotor is connected at the front pulley and the rotor rotates, so it's really easy to remember. The rotor rotates, connected to the front pulley. Now, when I was an apprentice, I used to watch auto electricians hold metal close to an alternator pulley, and if the metal got pulled in and touched the pulley, they knew that it was generating a magnetic field. So from a diagnostic point of view, you was halfway there. So that's the insides, that's a rotor. That's sandwiched in between this component here. This is called the stator. So the stator is a set of field magnets that's sandwiched inside the alternator casing. The stator collapses the magnetic field generated by the rotor, and it induces a voltage into its windings. Now the problem is we've now got a voltage inside those windings, but it's an AC voltage, so it's alternating current. So we need to convert that to a DC, because you cannot store AC voltage in a battery. It's got to be DC. And that's exactly what the diode pack does. There's a set of diodes in the back. The diode is a one-way electrical valve. So this device will convert AC, so an alternating current going from positive to negative polarity, and it converts it to a flat line DC. More of a ripple, but that's for later training courses. So that DC voltage now we can send to the battery and store in the battery. So let me explain about this electrical challenge we've got. This is speaking from a post-build perspective. So I'm driving this truck down the motorway. It's got these really nice throaty exhausts. So I'm not quite sure, is the engine revs genuinely too high? Do I need to have a revised diff ratio put in? Or have we got an electrical issue? Because the engine revs in terms of what I can see on the tachometer are just too high. Not massively, but when you've got a finely tuned ear, you can tell, you just know, you get a feel when something's not right. So I felt on idle speed, it was idling too fast. It would show about 550 RPM. I know these trucks will nicely idle and rumble away around 400. And that's exactly what I set out to test. I got a handheld tachometer and just laid it underneath the truck, and I measured just under 400 RPM.
Nearly about 400, just below.
Yeah. But when you got back inside the truck, it was showing 550. So that...
Okay, gentlemen, so I've exposed the rev counter. You can see there, it's sitting at...
There was a discrepancy. So then I went on to thinking, well, let's have a look at the system, because you can't fix anything if you don't know how it works. So we're not talking CAN bus, we're not talking digital Hall effect sensors, we're not talking any of that. This is old school technology. So it's that's off the back of the alternator. That's called a dynamic load. So that's for the rev counter. So it stands to reason, the more the alternator spins, the more revs you're doing. So the rev counter on the dash picks that one up. That one is a warning light. So when you put your key in the ignition, turn it on, and you get your battery light, which means the alternator is giving a ground to the bulb, and the other side is alive from the dash panel. And then when you start it up, of course, alternator charges, it goes live. So then you get 2 lives to a bulb, bulb goes out because it doesn't work. So that's for the bulb warning. This one is the charging lead, so the power from the alternator, that's why it's got a rubber end on it, goes to the battery. And this one is the isolated ground. So I think it's for petrol tankers. Alternators on trucks have separate grounds rather than bolting them to the body, just to reduce any risk of sparking. I think that's for like petrol tankers in Europe. Start it up, of course, alternator charges, it goes live. It's perfect sense, doesn't it? The faster the alternator spins, the more the rev counter will show. So there's this correlation between the two. There's a direct line, there's a wire connecting these two components. So I contacted Scania and hit a brick wall with them. They wanted to sell me new parts. I spoke to truck auto electricians and hit a brick wall. They were kind of the opinion, yeah, there's probably a revised part. And this took me back to the rear engine mountings when we were trying to fit the engine. Well, no, there isn't a revised part. They're the same part number. So I checked the part number between the V8 tachometer and the 6-cylinder, both the same. So this was going to be another test of endurance and getting to a solution without buying new parts. So I started to look at the schematics of this tachometer, and I realized there's a variable resistor. I took it out of the front of the dash panel as the truck was running. I pulled it out, and I could see on the side that there's a variable resistor. So this would slow down this electrical signal coming from the alternator, and that's exactly what we did, and that's how we found our solution. Back here, we've got this one here that goes to the battery. You've got this one here that dynamic load that goes to the rev counter, the tachometer. This one, W, for warning light, that provides the negative feed to the dashboard bulb that puts a battery light on. This one is an isolated ground, a negative. In Europe, these are part of legislation, so they're not just getting the ground, the negative from the alternator casing. They've got a separate ground, that's for fuel tankers and things like that, but it's now just become a standard on trucks to have an isolated ground. So for training purposes, this was another reminder to keep all your old parts. Don't just throw them away at random. I'm the anti-hoarder. I like to get rid of things, keep things tidy. But this is a really good example of why you should keep as many of the old parts as possible. So what I'm doing there is I'm dismantling the old road train tachometer, the rev counter. The back of it is being unscrewed there. You can see the circuit board, and it shows a before and after. What we can see there is how it was idling at 550, and then I found this variable resistor, this device that will slow down electrical current. It makes perfect sense that if we can slow down this electrical signal coming from the alternator by means of altering the resistance at the tachometer itself, we can actually adjust the idle speed inside the cab. And that led on to testing it afterwards. So even when we were finished, I held the throttle open at around 1500 RPM, and then I got back underneath the truck with my handheld tachometer and just measured that it was still accurate at different rev ranges. So this was a really good exercise, and I'm just dismantling it there on our bench just so you can see the actual adjustment there. So there's a variable resistor. So I hope you like the video, guys. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, and share the video. And remember, guys, Team 143, let's do this.